Hey guys, good to see you today. What we're going to talk about today is something called modalities or learning styles, learning channels, communication styles. All the same thing. And what we're talking about these is from the standpoint of communicating with people, getting the idea across. Now, I actually talked a little bit about this when I talked about the failure and success in communication. And in particular, when I talked about the story of the Cincinnati Reds and Juan and baseball and so forth. At any rate, this is something that's very significant. I want to take it and work with it a little bit more, take it to another level. Now, I'm going to start out with this one doing a little short activity. It's called the George activity. The George activity is actually something that was developed at Ohio State University. And I picked up on it. I think it's really a great little short interactive inventory that tells us a little bit about our learning styles. Now, what's going to happen is you've got a printout, handout. Handout is this one. It says George activity. And of course, the George activity has got $18 smiley faces on it. This is called George. Now, this is the way you do the activity. My lovely assistant, Katie, will come over here and join us. This particular activity will require that you have someone work with you. Now, what you're going to do is you're going to respond to these questions, but Katie is going to actually record my responses to the questions. So what will happen is Katie's going to write my name down on it, or your all's name down on it, okay? Katie's going to write my name down on it, and then Katie's going to have me remove my glasses and look at her. We're going to look each other in the eye, and then Katie is going to read to me one of the statements. Now, Katie, while you're reading these to me, I want you to hold them up because I don't want anyone to see what you're going to be reading or writing down. So Katie will just ask me a question. So ask me one of them, Katie.
Picture everyone in this room without hair.
Okay, I've done that. Now, when Katie asks me this question, she's looking me in the eye. And what you'll find is that you'll naturally react in a certain manner. What you'll do is you'll kind of roll your eyes up while you're looking, or you'll roll your eyes down while you're looking, or they might go to one side, hopefully not both sides, at the same time. But at any rate, as I respond to Katie's question and I move my eyes, Katie's going to keep track of that. She's going to make note of where my eye movement was, okay? After Katie asks the first question, Katie will go on to the second question, and third, fourth, and ask all 18 questions. And what I'm supposed to do is just relax and act naturally. I say, oh, that's interesting. Well, let's see. Okay? Now, you may think, well, Brent, I already know what's going on here. So isn't this kind of limiting my responses? Yeah, it does have an impact, but there's no other way that we can do this. But the questions are kind of ridiculous. Just relax, answer the questions naturally. Katie's going to record them. Okay? So I want you all to go ahead and pause right now and go ahead and do that. Go ahead and keep it running. Back up here. Okay, I'm going to assume that you all have all done that now. So once you've answered all 18 questions, I want the person that drew the arrows to go back and score this. And this is how you're going to score it. If the arrow points up, I want you to put a V in the box, okay? If the arrow points to the side, either side, I want you to put an A in the box. And if the arrow points down, I want you to put a T in the box. Now I'm going to tell you one thing that's a little bit different on this particular inventory and handout than I told you all about when we were talking about the success and failure, is I use the term kinesthetic. This inventory for some reason uses the term tactile. Tactile and kinesthetic are the same thing. Tactile is a far less common, far less used term, but tactile, kinesthetic, the same thing. So if you put a K down here, I don't care. Kinesthetic or tactile, same thing. Now, if you've got an arrow that's in the middle, Do you put a T or an A? I don't know. You drew the arrow, you tell me. You decide which is closer, the T or the K or the V or the T or the A or the V or the A. Make sense, guys? So, go ahead and score this now. Total up your number of V's, A's, and T's. Now, some of you are thinking, well, wait a minute, Brent. There was a couple of these where I just stared at them. If you've got one of those, tell the person to just put an X right in the middle. That one doesn't count for anything. You skip over it. So everyone will not necessarily have a total of 18 answers here because you're probably going to have one or two or sometimes even more that just have an X in the middle. Those X's are completely thrown out. They don't count. Okay, you got that? Now, assuming you have all that taken care of, what we're going to do now is determine what exactly does this mean. Now, the first one is the V's. How many people scored highest in the V's? I see a few hands out there. Okay, I don't see any hands out there, but nonetheless, my guess is that there's going to be a lot of you scored highest in the V's. This would suggest that you're very visually oriented when it comes to communication. Visually oriented people like pictures. They like to hear about a broad overview. They like to hear such detail in presentations that they kind of start creating this picture in their mind. Now I said I'll bet you a lot of you out there scored highest in the V category. The V category, visual, is the largest population group in the United States. Now I don't necessarily have information when you take this and go nationally or internationally with it. I suspect it's pretty much the same. But in the United States, this is going to be the highest group. Why do you think this is the highest group? It's because of one specific thing. TV. Did you know that more people in America own a TV than know the name of the president? I find that absolutely amazing, but supposedly that's accurate. More people in America own a TV than know the name of the president. That in itself has made us a very visually oriented society. Now, one thing that America has that absolutely nobody in the world can compete with is the quality of our TV. Our TVs, our programs, Hollywood is absolutely overwhelming compared to the rest of the world when it comes to what they produce, the movies and so forth. You ever see a French movie? Or one of those Japanese movies or a Chinese movie or something? Those things are freaking horrible. I mean, I'm not saying they have a bad storyline. I'm not saying they have bad actors, though my experience is they pretty much do. But what I'm saying is I can tell it's fake. I can tell this is a movie. I watch this stuff in the made in Hollywood, Avatar. Heck, I thought Avatar, they went to some other planet and filmed this thing. It was so real. We are really, really good at that. It's absolutely unbelievable. And what's happened is Americans have trained themselves to be very visually oriented people. Now there's one specific group of Americans that are even more visually oriented than the others. Who do you think that might be? People that grew up with TV. Now you say, well, TVs have been around for a long time. That's all of us. And that's true. All of us have this orientation. But when you get to a very young group, a youthful group, this V number shoots up even more, becomes more extreme. Now, a lot of people say, well, that's because of the video games, and that plays a role. There's no question about it. But what's happened is there was one specific TV program, and this program had greater impact than any other program that there's been on visually oriented people. And some people are surprised at what it is. Anybody got any ideas? It's MTV. MTV absolutely changed the world. Now we not only heard music, we saw music, so we started creating stories with the music. As the music is played, it had to move around real fast in order to keep people focused in, and it became synonymous with the song. Actually, another thing that happened based on that is it mattered a lot what your singer looked like. If anyone has watched American Idol before, some of the earlier American Idols, they'd have these people that would come in and they would sing and they would have such a beautiful voice. And Cromwell would say, "Is that the guy's name? Who was that? What was the guy's name that was always rude? He's British."
Piers?
Nah, this is old. Anyhow, y'all know who I'm talking about. Simon. And Simon would say, "You don't look like an American Idol." They said, "What do you mean I don't look like American Idol?" I said, "You don't look like one." And one of the other judges said, "You know, Aretha Franklin doesn't look like the American Idol you're talking about." Said Aretha Franklin wouldn't win this competition, would she? Now, there's one of the greatest singers of all time, but could they actually sell records today? Visual has actually become that important. I'll tell y'all a story. A friend of mine writes music. He's had a number of top 40 hits. He's been involved in the music industry for years and years and years. And he was talking about years ago, Terry Clark, the country artist. Many of y'all may know who she is. If you don't, you can Google her. She had a real good run 10 years ago or so. Terry Clark, who's Canadian, drove down to Nashville with a catalog of songs, and she tried out at every record company that would let her have a tryout. And everyone said, "Nah, she's okay. No big deal. Not interested." So she spent however many months in Nashville, got nothing. Terry Clark goes home, and she said, and I've seen her in this interview, but he told me the story. He actually was one of the people that was involved with her career. As a matter of fact, he dated her little sister. But said, went home, and over the next year, for no particular reason, she decided she would get in shape. She dropped 40 pounds. She said, "I was not heavy, but I was a big girl." She drops 40 pounds. The next summer, she goes back to Nashville. She says, "I'm not giving up yet. I'm going to give this another try." Went back to Nashville. She said, "I had offers from 6 record companies. They were falling over themselves to hire this woman because now she's, instead of being 6 foot and average, she is 6 foot and skinny as a rail." And they're going, "Wow, we got to have her. She's a great singer." You're selling a whole lot more than just the music. Visual has become that important to us. Largest population group. Visual people operate on the philosophy that the mind is more slowly stirred than by the eye. Now, some things that people like if you're communicating with them, if you're teaching them, they're visually oriented. They like overheads. They like videos. They like pictures. They like detailed analogies where they can create this picture themselves. Flip charts, graphics. They like color, all the different colors that you can bring in. They enjoy those. They like for you to demonstrate stuff. They look at you, someone that's communicating with them, and they say, "Do they look trustworthy? Are they enthusiastic about being here? Can they tell me a good story where I can create this picture in my mind?" That's what my visually oriented person is looking for. And as I say, that is the majority of the American population, and particularly when we're talking about younger people. Now, the next group we're going to look at is your A's. How many scored highest in A? I don't see any hands out there. If I do see some hands, there's very, very few of them. If you scored highest in A, the auditory, there's probably one of 3 characteristics you exhibit. Number 1 is you're old, very old. You grew up prior to TV. Probably none of you all. I was actually doing this at an industry one time. We were talking about communication. And I had 2 people in there that scored highest in A out of 30. And 2 out of 30 is about right. And I said, "None of you are old. I don't think that's a problem, or at least you're not that old." And I said, the second one would be you have a musical inclination. People that really enjoy music, play musical instruments, have a tendency to develop their hearing real well. And this beautiful young lady in the front row, she said, that's interesting. Said, "I can play the piano. I've taught myself to play the guitar. I love music." Said, "I have very good pitch." They call it perfect pitch. That's actually not correct. It's absolute pitch. But said, "I have very good absolute pitch." So that's very common that if you have that, you're auditorily oriented. And the third option is that you grew up in a household where you either didn't have TV or you had very limited access to TV. Well, I looked over at this other gentleman sitting there, and he was a middle-aged guy, and he was pretty rough looking, and not mean rough, but I mean just rough. And I said, "Sir, can you play a musical instrument?" He said, "No, sir, I can't." He said, "But I ain't even got no electricity in my house." He grinned real big, didn't have any front teeth, and I said, "Well, that explains it." Auditory orientation. Now, at one time, the largest portion, auditory orientation, was the largest portion of Americans because no TV, and to add to this, we had radio. Is people listen to the radio constantly. And radio went to the point of actually having soap operas where people would read the lines or they would read books to people. That's something that's kind of interesting. NPR did a program like that years ago where you could tune in at like 7 o'clock at night and they would read for an hour some book. And I was surprised how much I really enjoyed that. They don't do it anymore, or at least they don't do it in Bowling Green Market anymore, but I used to listen to that all the time. Whereas a lot of people like to rent the audio books and listen to them in their car when they're driving. I haven't been doing that, but at the same time, something that's kind of interesting. Now, my auditorily oriented people, what are they going to look for in someone that is communicating with them, someone teaching them? They're going to look at your word usage. They're going to look at the tone of your voice. They're going to look at other things you bring into the conversation, like you say, "Hey, this is important." Other sounds that are going on around. They want to hear you change the level, modulate your voice. They want to listen to your voice, and they want to hear that you're excited about this. These people like facts, statistics, numbers, to the point. That's the things that they're looking for. They also want to interact with you. They want to ask questions. They want you and them to have a give and take so much as you telling them. So they want to participate in this opportunity also. People that are very auditorily oriented may say, their philosophy may be, few people take the time to really hear what someone has to say. Okay, my third group is my tactile or my kinesthetic group. How many of y'all scored highest in that? Probably a pretty good number of you. So we got very high, very low, in the middle. But here's something I'll bet. Regardless of which one of these you scored highest on, you scored second highest on this one. Everybody did. Because tactile, while not number one, is very prominent among both types. Tactile, this would suggest that you have a physical hobby, that you have a physical job, that you learn by doing, that you like to be active, move around. Your philosophy is, tell me I may listen, show me I may understand, but involve me and I will learn. Now, what do people who like the tactile form of communication really like? Any kind of doing activity. Get me doing something, moving around. Questions, interactions. Let's take a break. Then they come back and they want to have more movement. Hey, you're holding something. Let me hold it. I want to see what it feels like. I want to know the weight. I want to know the texture. I want to know if there's a smell to it. Then I want to take a break. And then I want to come back and have more interaction and more discussion. And opportunity to do something. Don't make me sit down. This is what the tactile person does to communicate more, to learn more, to retain information better. Now, you're going to interact with all of these people where you work. You're going to supervise them and be supervised by them. You say, okay, Brent, what you've said here makes sense. But what am I going to do? Give them an inventory to determine what learning style or communication style they have? No, all you have to do is watch them. A visually oriented person. This is what they'll do to give away that they're very visually oriented. Let's say that there's an accident outside. Visually oriented person will come in and say, Katie, did you see that wreck outside? man, I saw this car coming, and this other one didn't see him pull it right. Oh man, it was terrible. They fool with their eyes. I hate to see something like that happen. They use the word see, saw, seen. Visually oriented. You all tell me, what's an auditorily oriented person going to do? Katie, did you hear about that wreck outside? Well, I was walking down the road and I heard these tires screeching and horns blowing. Then I heard this big boom. Man, I tell you, I hate to hear about things like that. Get it? Watch people around you. They'll do this. They're telling you whether visual or auditory. What do you think the tactile or kinesthetic person is going to do? Man, I got a story for you. Here's the deal. Man, I was at the bottom of the hill and I was walking up the hill and this one car pulled out in front and boom, man, they hit. And what they're doing is they're acting it out. These are people that like to move when they talk. What do y'all think I am? When they're sitting down, their leg is bouncing. They're going like this. They're moving around all the time. You know, there's a lot of interesting information you can get out of whether a person's visual, auditory, or kinesthetic. Tactile, physical, kinesthetic, tactile, physical, all the same thing. So, let's say that you're studying for a test. Give you a little hint here in this file. If you're visually oriented, what you need to do is you need to sit down quietly and look over your notes. If you're auditorily oriented, you need to get together with a friend and you all talk about the class and you talk about ideas and things you heard and things you thought. And if you're tactile, you need to rewrite your notes. You actually need to rewrite your notes for a couple of reasons. One is your handwriting is probably so sloppy you can't hardly read it anyway. But you rewrite your notes because it's an activity. Tell you something else a tactile person can do. Note cards are great. Note cards aren't great because you're going to flip through the cards. It's because you can stick them in your pocket. And you learn by movement. So you're walking across campus to go to lunch. You whip that card out and you read a few things. Oh, it's interesting. And you walk on. And you pull the card out. Movement helps you learn. Has anyone ever heard of the show Room 222? Room 222 goes back into the 1970s, early 1970s. It was about an inner city school. And at any rate, the lead character was a black male. I don't remember his name, but it was one of the real early shows that had a black lead in it. Along about the time the Flip Wilson show was a similar type situation. But at any rate, it was about a high school history teacher. It was an integrated school and just about life in the integrated school and so forth. It was really a well done show. Well thought of at the time. We don't hear a lot about it today. But at any rate, there was a gentleman that went to school there, and he was a tall kid, and he had an opportunity to go to college on a basketball scholarship. And anyhow, his grades were okay, but they weren't great, but he needed an A on this last exam to ensure that he was going to have the GPA in order to accept the scholarship and go to college. So the whole school got behind him and they were helping him study, and the teacher was working with him and said, you know, you can do this. You can do it. We'll work with you. And he studied hard and he got all his information together, and the day came to take the final, and he comes in and he sits down and everyone's so excited, you know, Dante's going to excel at this. And about 5 minutes into the class, he gets up and walks out the door. And I remember the look on the teacher's face when he walked out. I was like, but he can't leave the class. He's giving an exam, so he stays in the class, and the students are all looking and they're confused. And he gets all the tests taken up, and he's looking for the student in the hallway. And he walks around, and he goes into the gym, and there he is. He's got a basketball, and he's dribbling it, and he hits a little layup, and he shoots a free throw, and the teacher goes over and he says, Dante, he said, what happened? He said, you got up and walked out of the test. And he said, I know. He said, I really thought I knew the material. I really did. And when I sat down to take it, I didn't know any of it. I looked at the questions and it's like I went completely blank. I had no idea. He said, and looking back, said, I know how ridiculous it was. Said the first question was, and he stated the first question. He said, I know the answer to that. And he told him the answer. And he's dribbling that ball around. He's hitting a little hook shot. And he said, yeah, I knew you knew that. He said, and the second question was this. And he said, yeah, that's an easy one. And they're standing there talking, and the instructor is asking him one question after another, and he's answering them. He said, oh, I've got that one down. It's a piece of cake. He said, me and Tammy talked about that one. She explained it to me. He shoots a free throw, and he said, but I have blown it. I've lost my college scholarship. I won't be going to school after all. And he said, well, he said, I've actually asked you every question on this exam, and based on your responses, you've got a 96. He looked at him, he said, how is it possible that I know this in here playing basketball, but I don't know it sitting in class taking an exam? And the instructor explained to him, because you're tactile oriented in your learning style and communication. See how powerful that is? Now, it's more powerful with some people than it is others. But nonetheless, it's something that's very significant. If you're tactile, move while you're studying. I carry those little cue cards with me all the time. It's how I learn a lot of my presentations. So I got through graduate school. So I had all these little cards. I'd go places and do things all the time. They say, you're not going to sit in and study? I said, no, I'm going to walk downtown. I walk a lot. I'd whip those cards out and read something and walk a lot. I retain it like that. Now, let's go back to your industry setting. You're in an industry setting and you're trying to communicate with people, sharing ideas. It's something that is, sometimes you have to tell them and they pick it up. Sometimes you have to write it out and they pick it up. And sometimes we have to say, guys, this is important. Write it down. Fellas, I want to thank you all for joining me today. It's been a lot of fun. Please do this inventory. I'll have a little assignment for you, which is basically turn this inventory in and tell me what you scored. Hey, you all have a great day. We'll see you later.